former state representative Nate Willems.
Thank you very much, Liz. Again, my name is Nate Willems. Thank you all for coming today. I just wanted to briefly share with you how I came to supporting Cory Booker. I mean, there are dozens of great reasons why you should caucus for Cory Booker. I just want to tell you kind of a little bit about how I got here, the process, and just suggest you think about it too. Our party, the Democratic Party, is probably the most diverse political party the world has ever known. We have the broadest coalition of different groups of people together that you can possibly imagine. We have union members, low-wage workers, people living in poverty, people living in near poverty, African Americans, Latinos, immigrants from every country, environmentalists, feminists, LGBTQ community. We have disabled Americans, seniors, Catholics, college students. All of these different kinds of people that have really kind of one thing in common, and that is at some point in time, and maybe today, they were either ignored, pushed aside, or pissed on by the political and economic elites in this country. And critically, when they needed help, it was liberals and the Democratic Party that stood with them and fought for justice for them. Now, but all these different people that I talked about, I mean, they don't obviously have a whole lot more than that in common. They don't live in harmony next to each other. They may not physically even live near each other at all. I mean, in Mount Vernon, how many black, brown, or immigrant neighbors do you have? Probably not many. And we all know that the other side's playbook is division, wedge issues, trying to pit people against other people, trying to make you think, well, gee, the Democrats are focusing on these people or that people, but not me. And that's how Republicans win elections. Watching the different candidates in this caucus process, I do have some concerns as to how we're going to put the party back together. I mean, I won't go into details, but you know, there's certain candidates that people say, well, gee, I'm not sure if moderate Democrats will support them, or that. Another candidate, I don't know if African Americans or Latinos will support them, or another candidate, or how do we get people excited about this candidate? When our party is united, we can win. But when all those constituent parts of our party are energized, the Democratic Party is unstoppable. And I think Cory Booker is the best candidate to unite and energize. I'm not running, but if I was Christian Andrews, I would want Cory Booker on the top of the ticket with me. But I just want to be clear about one last thing. I mean, it's not just about winning, as important as that is, but it's also about winning in the way that the Democratic Party should. Yes. By advocating for all of those people and energizing and uniting all of those people who need us to fight for justice. And Cory Booker's the guy to do it. So, folks.
These days because we're going back and forth to DC like crazy. And yesterday we had a classified briefing on this most recent intervention into the Middle East. And it was one of those moments where I came out and I was standing next to, walking out with Mike Lee. And look, I can write a dissertation on my disagreements with Mike Lee, but he and I are friends and we passed a lot of legislation together. And he was so angry about the briefing, and so was I, but here is this beautiful man who's Mormon, who's from Utah, and I think he got the closest he ever got to cursing in his life. And then many of you saw his comments already. Look, I want to get into my normal stump speech, I want to get into Q&A, But I want to start this differently because some reporters told me there's some folks here from outside of the state who've been doing something really noble, which is going to all the presidential stops of other candidates to push an issue that I think is worthy of giving them a few minutes at the beginning to have some dialogue. Because I'm just a guy that believes that makes us better. And I could write a dissertation on my disagreements with people, but we have a problem in our country right now where we can't even talk to each other. Some of you all went to holiday dinners where you were trying not to bring up politics because you were afraid it might deteriorate things. And what I actually find from actually listening, Brene Brown says it's hard to hate up close, so pull people in. And I've had these incredible successes as a United States Senator because people on the outside you may think you disagree with a lot, but by sitting down with them and looking for that common ground, you can find ways to get things done even if you don't agree on everything. In fact, I went out to, when I got down to the Senate, I said, I'm going to go to dinner with this many people. I invited Ted Cruz out to dinner, and it was hard. It was hard to find a restaurant because I'm a vegan, and he is from Texas. But we've now passed legislation together for people recovering after disasters, for communities recovering after disasters. Chairman Inhofe, he's a chairman of a very conservative senator, chairman of a committee, but I've come to respect him and see his dignity. And when I was in his office doing Bible study, I go to Bible study in his office, I saw an African-American young girl on his bookshelf, and we got to talking, that was his granddaughter. And now we've passed a very important amendment, legislation on helping with foster kids and helping with kids who are homeless. So I'm going to stop and ask, I see some of them in the room, and I wonder if they will take this opportunity to have a few minutes, because we want to give everybody a chance to talk, but I know they've been popping up a lot of folks, and I have some areas of disagreement, but maybe we can find some common ground, we'll see. But go ahead.
You're talking to me.
I am, my man, because I'm so jealous of your hair. Can we agree on hair equality, man? Not make you feel so jealous?
Venmo you some hair, I would. Should I get a mic or should I just...
Just go, people can hear you.
All right.
It's a small room.
Hello, Senator. My name is Ruben, and I'm an African-American Jew.
Where are you from?
I'm from Detroit.
Where about? My mom's from Detroit.
Okay, well, I live on Rosa Parks. Yeah, I'm not going to give everybody my but you'll know where that is.
Yes, I do.
So my name is Ruben. I'm an African-American Jew, and I, as you seem to be aware, I'm deeply frustrated about the ways that politicians in both parties frequently cite their support for Israel as proof that they're working to fight anti-Semitism. Those are two separate things to me. And I don't want my tax dollars being used to fund the Israeli military's many documented human rights violations against Palestinians, particularly Palestinian children. We know for a fact that many of them are snatched up in the middle of the night, detained without due process, tortured, abused. And I know that more and more young voters like myself feel this way. And I believe that any Democrat who wants to be seen as a progressive needs to stop giving Israel a blank check with zero accountability. So I wanted to ask you, that's why I'm here, if you would commit to sponsoring the Senate version of Representative Betty McCollum's No Way to Shoot a Child bill. And as Senator or President, would you commit to any form of accountability for Israel, who receives $3.8 billion in funding from American taxpayers' money? I know that we could use that here.
Thank you very much for that. So first of all, I haven't read the bill, so I won't commit to it until I read it. So I commit to you that I will read the bill.
It's a great bill. You should read it.
I will look through it. But this goes to deeper issues too, because we right now have a real challenges in the Middle East, and there's people's rights, and that just in that neighborhood being violated in ways that don't sit with this country. We give Saudi Arabia a tremendous amount of money, and they're violating LGBTQ rights, violating women's rights. We definitely have seen human rights violations all throughout that region. And so this is why I go on there multiple times to meet with Palestinian leaders, to go to the West Bank, and I saw things that were deeply disturbing. It's why I fought this administration about pulling their resources, things to give access to clean water and affirm other basic human rights. I do believe that Israel has a right to exist, and I believe it has a right to defend itself. One of the things that has me deeply concerned right now is terrorist groups like Hezbollah have more sophisticated weapons to shoot at the state of Israel. And so these are things that I feel very proud that I've supported the Iron Dome to stop the kind of rocket attacks that are getting worse. I've gone out to see the way our taxpayer dollars are spent to stop the tunneling technology that have been used to abduct Israelis. So this is a complicated, layered issue. I'm going to look at the bill.
It's not that complicated. Do you believe Palestinian children deserve freedom, dignity, and safety?
I believe yes.
Furthermore on that, as a Palestinian, I'd also like to say, hi, my name is Mo. I'm actually coming from New Jersey, Emerson, Central Jersey.
What town?
Hazlitt, it's a small town, I'm not sure if you know what it is, which is totally fair, it is a very small town. I have my remarks here written down. So I personally am a student activist, and I've been arrested.
And where do you go to school?
Go to school in DC.
Okay. Jersey schools weren't good enough for you? What's up?
I'm based in New Jersey, but I wanted to pursue politics, so I decided to
You got a great rebuttal. Like you could have said, "Yo, why'd you go to Stanford?" Go ahead. Go ahead.
I've been arrested for my activism before, and I had to face my biggest fear in being arrested as a person of color, going and spending time in jail because I believe that my future is teetering on the edge of life and death for multiple reasons. And a big reason is because I am part of the Palestinian diaspora, and therefore I had the privilege to write and my right to resist in this country, but Palestinian children don't have that right. And like my counterpart said, not only are a lot of kids snatched in the middle of the night, 91% of Palestinian children who are charged with offenses that they often are not allowed to know what their charge is, get snatched up in the middle of the night. And furthermore, 43% of them, that's almost half, do not get a first meal until more than 10 hours in the middle of the night. And while I think it is great that you decided to talk about the Middle East and what is going on there, because we do need someone who knows foreign policy very, very well with how tensions are going, I need you to talk more about Palestinian children and what's going on there. So I'm going to ask you again, I understand you haven't read the bill, but I want to know what your firm steps and commitments are when it comes to Palestinian children. Not Iran, not Iraq, Palestinian children. And how are you, again, going to end the atrocities that are happening in this place, especially, again, when there are $3.8 billion going towards the Israeli military and funding them when they are literally under investigation by the International Criminal Court for violating human rights and perpetuating war crimes. War crimes, Senator Booker. So please answer my question. How are you going to end both Palestinian children being detained and their human rights being violated, and how are you going to go about fixing the problem of the money that we're giving to Israel?
So how I'll do it is when I'm President of the United States, we're going to start funding humanitarian projects again in the West Bank and Palestinians in general. We're going to refund the East Jerusalem Hospital. We're going to make sure we're continuing to fund access to clean water. We're going to stop this erosion that this president has done, which I think is not supporting the two-state solution and frankly supporting things within the Netanyahu administration that have been undermining that pathway. We're going to do everything we can under my presidency to make sure that human rights are defended because this nation needs to lead with its values again.
Is one of those things redirecting the aid to the Israeli military to Palestinian children instead? Because again, that money is going directly towards harming Palestinian children. So I would love if you would commit right now to redirect the aid that's going towards human rights abuses instead of going to children, especially in Gaza, which is now, by the UN's definition of livable, completely unlivable. Completely unlivable. Whether it be access to water or access to food. They count their calories in Gaza and keep them on a subsistence, barely living, subsistence way of living to their food and caloric content. So can you promise me that you're going to redirect aid from Israel to Gaza and to the West Bank?
I will promise you that I will stand up and fight for human rights of people in, frankly, the Gaza area, West Bank, and in that region, especially understanding that there is real trials going on. But the trials in Gaza, you know that Hamas there has attacked Palestinian children as well. They've done things that literally have put them in peril, like putting their rocket sites in schools and hospitals, which is directly using children as human shields. So again, the reason why I've gone to the West Bank, the reason why I've gone to the border in this country, the reason why I've gone to African nations to stand up for the rights of LGBTQ children. My entire life, I've been fighting for human rights, and love of country is a wonderful thing, but love should not stop at the border, and the policies of this country should be affirming peace in that region and human rights for everyone. Go ahead, your hand up.
I'm a resident of Mount Vernon. I grew up in Vineland, New Jersey. I'm also Jewish, and I look around this room and I don't see anyone else that I know here that's Jewish. And I'm not prepared. That I knew. I'm not prepared like these two very articulate young men and I don't
With
absolutely.
great haircuts, by the way.
Pardon?
I was just joking, I said with great haircuts.
Yes, which I've been leading my whole life, but the hair like that. But anyway, I just do want to say that there are two sides to every story, and I really like your response to them.
Thank you very much. Can we do two more from this group, and then we'll do, so one, and then who's the second person who wants to speak from this group? And then we'll go down there, then is it okay with the group if we go back to the folks who live in the community?
Yeah.
All right?
As a Jewish student, I'd like to respond to that because I have a related but different concern, and that's that I'm a student at Brown University, and in the wake of the anti-Semitic massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018, me and my other Jewish friends were reeling with shock. We were feeling unsafe in this country and on our campuses. And days after the attack, you used the deaths of 11 Jews as a platform to announce your support for an anti-BDS law, which would further criminalize Jewish students and our Palestinian allies. Instead of targeting the white nationalism which endangered us, you played a cynical and frankly anti-Semitic game of politics with our lives and attempted to strip our constitutional rights, and that was deeply hurtful to me. While I appreciate that you ultimately voted against the bill, your use of this harmful framing makes me deeply concerned about the fate of Jewish and Palestinian solidarity activists under your presidency. And I want to ask if, as president, you will commit to fight for us by combating not only combating white nationalism, but reversing Trump's executive order on anti-Semitism, which defined Judaism as nationality, and opposing all conflation of anti-Semitism with Palestinian and Jewish activists who are fighting for justice for these Palestinian children, for justice for Palestinians in Gaza fighting for freedom.
Thank you so much. I can get your name.
I'm Zach.
Sorry, Zach. So we can disagree on the framing because the way you made that sound, it just did not reflect my heart nor what we did. But we can disagree. That good people can disagree. And you clearly, Zach, are a good person who is very, very concerned. You can tell by the passion in your voice about these issues. And so when you asked, your question that you asked at the end is, will I stand up against white nationalism? Yes. Number two, will I, the second part of that question was this idea of not talking about these issues in an international context, but talking about the rising levels of violence against Jews in this country, which is not only rising levels of violence, but rising levels of property destruction and more. Absolutely, yes. And so we may not agree clearly, Zach, on a lot of the issues that you're discussing, but my whole life has been about dealing with this issue because your justice as a Jewish American, my justice as an African American, and someone's justice as a white American, these are interwoven. As James Baldwin said very strongly when Angela Davis was arrested, she said they're going to come for you. If they come for you in the morning, they're going to come for me at night. And so that's the passion with which I drive. And I'm going to go to the last.
I'm sorry, but I'd like to respond to that because
can.
Angela Davis stands up for a free Palestine, and she stands up for freedom for all people everywhere. And I'm sorry, but when you can say all you want about fighting white nationalism, but when you say that when you compare people that are fighting for BDS the same way we did BDS against South Africa, another apartheid state, you are minimizing anti-Semitism in America, and you're making me and my Jewish and Palestinian friends unsafe, and you're aligned with Trump on that. So I don't want. Yes, you are. This is Trump's executive order.
Let's just finish this.
I'm sorry. And I appreciate that you are committed to fighting white nationalism. I see that in your career. I see that in your criminal justice reform record. But I want a firm commitment that you understand that criticizing Israel and fighting for human rights is not the same as anti-Semitism, and that you will cease that comparison and cease supporting any bill that suppresses our free speech when we're fighting out for human rights.
So Zach, and then we're going to go to the last question over here on this issue that I'd like to start.
Executive
I'm sorry,
order
over here.
specifically, please.
That's where you want? Yeah. Okay. So Zach, so first of all, clearly we're not going to be in agreement. And trust me, I have a feeling, I know, maybe not as much as you, but know a lot about Angela Davis. Malcolm X said, it's hard to find, you can search the world 2 times over, but you're never going to find 2 people who agree on everything. My beliefs on the line with Angela Davis or Malcolm X's completely, but they are heroes to me. So please don't minimize my love and admiration for great heroes from the African American community or any Americans, just because we don't agree across the board on the issues. And when it comes to combating anti-Semitism, and you can keep speaking as if you speak for all Jews, in the same way I don't speak for all blacks. And so I just want to let you know, this is an issue I was dealing with before I became a United States Senator. I was writing articles about not just anti-Semitism, but black-Jewish relations. I've been dealing with these issues my entire life, speaking for groups like the ADL who are against, who work every day to not only deal with Jews, but deal with racism and bigotry in this country as a whole. You and I come from the same place, a commitment to justice. We may disagree, but I honor you, and that's why I wanted you to have a chance to speak, and I appreciate that.
Okay. So, like many other Ashkenazi Jewish people,
Could you forgive me for a second? What's your
okay.
name?
Hi, my name is Lila. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I go to school in Ohio.
Where do you go to school?
Oberlin.
Lila, why did you say it almost hesitantly, like you didn't want to say it? Because my friend from Brown was just like proud. He's like, Brown. So Oberlin.
Okay, so like many other Ashkenazi Jewish people in my community, my great-grandparents embarked on dangerous journeys of long distances to reach safety, freeing the violence of pogroms in Eastern Europe. As you know, there's been a recent wave of white nationalism emboldened under the Trump presidency. There were the recent anti-Semitic attacks against Persian synagogues in LA. There was Muncie. I am terrified and heartbroken about the violent anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish communities across the United States, which is why I am disgusted and disappointed that your response to this anti-Semitism is supporting the U.S. in providing military funding to Israel in the form of Apache attack helicopters and Hellfire missiles, which in 2014 were used to kill 1,500 Palestinian civilians, including 500 children. These attacks were called war crimes by the UN. This does not make me safer here and is being used to murder hundreds of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. As my friend Mo asked before, as a progressive president, would you commit to stop using IWIN's and my taxpayer dollars to fund the slaying of Palestinians? It is not making us safer here, and I don't feel safe, and the money is being used to murder people.
So, first of all, I appreciate that, and the safety, the feeling of safety in our communities all around the country, whether it's gun violence, whether it's rises in anti-Semitic attack, or rising against, like attacks against Latinos, friends of mine who are in the Sikh communities, see rises in attacks, and I appreciate that. And again, we have just different takes on it. I think when Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel, that Israel has a right to defend itself. Excuse me, Hamas.
Are they defending themselves by jailing Palestinian children? Are they defending themselves by taking blockade, making Gaza to defend human rights violations?
Sit down.
Talk about killing civilians, and you're talking about a bombing.
I'm sorry, you cannot keep pivoting that. You have to address what is happening.
finish.
We only have the chance to get Senator Booker to Mount Vernon this one time.
Yes.
You asked us to speak to him, and we're speaking to him, and we're
Well, you
asking him to
had
be
your
on
say.
board and not pivoting to talking about it.
There are a lot of people who would like to
I know.
ask us, we could wrap this up, that would be great.
So the last thing I just want to say, Zach, that I don't pivot to talking points. If there's anything people know about me, these are things I care very personally about and very deeply about. And the lives of people in that region, if it's any area of the country, I'm on the ranking member of the Africa Subcommittee, and I spent more time going to the Middle East than any place. It's because I care about human life and human dignity that I do those things. And so again, if this country, we talk about challenges with foreign policy. I mean, when we saw attacks on our country, we did things in response to those attacks that I don't agree with, like invading Iraq. And I look at what the Israelis are doing to try to defend themselves, because if they put down their arms, we know already that terrorists would overrun that country.
No.
Well, we don't agree with you. We may not agree on that, but I've been over there and visited. I've sat with literally Muslims in the Israeli government and had this very conversation. And so we clearly disagree on the right for Israel to protect and defend themselves, which I will always stand up for. I will not compromise. They are a critical ally to our country, and they have a right to exist. And there are people who are trying to literally, in their charter, like Hamas, want to run them into the oceans. And so we may disagree on this policy, but again, this does not mean my support of the state of Israel, which is firm and resolute, does not mean that I'm not one of the people in the United States Senate that works. Most of my visits to that region are meeting with Muslim leaders and Palestinians in the past to make sure that we are doing what we're right to restore, from the human rights resources to critical aid, and more importantly to me, to ultimately get to a just end, which is a two-state solution and the self-determination of peoples, which is something I
Billions of
fundamentally
dollars
believe in.
going to a violent military that suppresses children is not supporting the children. It is not supporting human rights.
You've also deflected on the question of the executive order. You did not say whether or not you would repeal it or not. You had no answer to that. You furthermore have deflected every time by using scare tactics, by likening Arabs to terrorists. We're not a hive mind. We deserve human rights. And I want you again to answer yes or no. Are you going to repeal the executive order, which is hurting my ability to resist my oppression as a person of color and as a Palestinian? And are you going to, again, take away military funding or redirect that military funding to children who are, yes, Arab, and yes, proud to be Arab, and deserve the humanity that any other person deserves? That you're refusing to talk about, and you're deflecting every single time by using talking points like Hamas and like Hezbollah. Tell me yes or no.
Folks, I think
Tell me yes or no. I want a yes or no from the candidate.
So no, I will not redirect funding. I will put more funding into affirming human rights and dignity of folks, but I'm not going to redirect funding. Yeah, that's a no
Shame.
question.
Thank you. The second question, again, the executive order. Will you repeal the executive order or not?
Which executive order? I'm sorry.
The one that conflates Judaism as a nationality and has silenced the ability for SJP activists and Jewish Voice Peace activists to do their work.
I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, but again,
You should look
I will continue to oppose what this administration has done to undermine peace and security,
We're with
to
JP
deny,
activists, and I would love if you would reach out to
to
them.
deny Palestinians in that region fundamental basic human rights. America needs to go back to doing that funding. And again, I appreciate your passion and what you're saying, but I would never equate something I fought against quite strongly. These are not talking points. There are real, serious terrorist groups in that region that threaten us. Hezbollah has killed a lot of Americans.
Who is us?
And I will
I'm
not-
talking about
I will
Hezbollah.
not-
I'm talking about
I am talking about the
children.
people that are threatening the state of Israel and are doing things every single day
Listen, thank you
to
for
plot
taking my question.
and plan. You're welcome. Clearly, we're not going to agree on
I would
that.
appreciate
Wait, I'm just grateful for you all taking the time. I'm going to jump into. I'm actually. Can I give a little bit of more of an introduction if I can, and then we'll do Q&A. Okay.
Be outside if anyone wants to talk.
We have information outside if anybody's interested in why we're here.
Give them a round of applause. They've come a long way.
I forgot my phone, sorry.
That's allowed.
So, Iowa nice in another demonstrated right now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're raising your hand, but can I get a little bit of introduction, introductory remarks, unless you want to say something on topic real quick? Okay. I'm going to let it go, but I'm going to go really quick. But I really appreciated them, by the way, and the way in which they conducted themselves, and I'm grateful for your patience, because I know they're not from your community, and whoever stood up and said that this is short time. But a lot of the way let's just go right to the cut of it. I'm actually running for president because of situations like this. I'm very serious. We have stopped in our ability to talk to each other as a country. We have a severed belonging in our nation, where people who agree with each other and our political spaces do not reflect our common values and our common cause. And so this was really important for me to give them a chance, because I've said from the very beginning, I am running for president of the United States because I believe we are falling deeper and deeper into tribalism. And the lines that divide us, many people are beginning to think they're stronger than the ties that bind us. I believe this election is not about who has the best 15-point policy plans on different issues. I want to tell you, I think I might just very well have better policy plans. And we can talk about that. But this is something deeper, and I hope that by the time you leave here, you understand that I'm running for president, not just because of my policy positions, but because I think our nation very strongly needs a revival of civic grace. We need to have a more courageous empathy for one another. We need to remember that patriotism is love of country, and you can't love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. Now that needs to catch some people off guard. Cory, you're trying to beat Donald Trump, and you're talking about love. And I had one of my favorite moments at the very beginning of my campaign for president here in Iowa. I was running for the stage in a big town hall, and I'm about to go to the stage, and a big guy sees me. I don't know if you all know this, but I'm a big guy. I'm a former tight end for Stanford, a former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And I'm about to jump up on the stage, and the big guy puts his arm around me and goes, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And my response is, "Dude, that's a felony." or heal our nation or get big things done if we're doubling down on trying to out-Trump Trump. This is not a campaign where we are going to win as a party if we keep talking about what we're against and don't talk enough about what we're for. This is a time in the country where we can't campaign wrong and think we're going to end up governing right. And let me tell you something. I want to beat Donald Trump. I want to send Mitch McConnell back to the back benches. I have a sense of urgency about that. But please understand that it's important to me that I do not think the end of the Democratic Party is beating Republicans. In this moral moment, I think the calling of the Democratic Party is to unite Americans. And I hear this sometimes. How we got to a point where, excuse me, I'm turning off my microphone because I'm getting loud. How we got to the point where pundits will say this to me. Democrats, Senator Booker, would you please, Democrats think the #1 concern for them is someone who can just beat Donald Trump. And I always look at the pundit and I go, dear God, can't we have bigger aspirations than that? Beating Donald Trump is necessary but not sufficient. Beating Donald Trump is the floor, it's not the ceiling. Beating Donald Trump gets us out of a valley, but it doesn't get us to the mountaintop. And the way we have always gone higher in this country, to find higher ground is when we find common ground. Think about this for a second. I love rugged individualism and self-reliance, such important values. But rugged individualism didn't get us to the moon. It didn't beat the Nazis. We did those things together. My Iowa grandma, born and raised in Des Moines. My family comes from a town called Buxton, Iowa, which doesn't really exist anymore, but it does exist on the map. But this was a place where our values, the American dream for these immigrants from Europe who went into the mines together in an integrated town, it turned from the 1800s to the 1900s. It was well ahead of its time. A great Iowa author calls this the America's utopia. Blacks and whites together, integrated in a town, going into the mines side by side, together, scraping from the earth. Their American dream together. When they had quilting bees, you had people from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, with black migrants from the South, stitching their fabrics, cloths, creating a greater whole in that quilt. You want to talk about standing together? When a miner died, they wouldn't go to the funeral. The men would go back down in the mine. They would give that day's work, pay, to the widow. Look at our history. This is us. When the Russians put up Sputnik, we didn't tear each other apart against partisan lines. We created a bigger table where we brought hidden figures together with white astronauts, and we said, that's nice, you got into orbit, but we're going to the moon. This is about love, because love isn't what folks think it is. Love is storming a beach in Normandy, not turning to your person to your right and saying, Republican or Democrat? No. Love is Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner dying together in Mississippi side by side for other people's voting rights. Love is that school teacher who might be in this room right now, who doesn't know how they're going to pay their rent and their student loans. But when some child that's not theirs, may not look with them, maybe an immigrant from Sudan comes into their classroom without something they need, food, school supplies, sanitary products, they still reach in their pocket anyway and pay for something for their kids. This is how we do better, when we love one another, when we stand with one another. And you want to know how that beats Donald Trump? Let me tell you right now. You want to talk about the fighters in this race, and I respect and love all of them. I'm not saying that's not, was that a talking point? It's not a talking point. These are people I serve with in the Senate. We're in the trenches of the Senate, most of them. Bernie, Elizabeth, Amy, Michael Bennet, Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand. God, I would go to battle with them anytime. Tough, strong folks. Vice President, an honorable man. He swore me in. People like Andrew Yang. You want to know about the goodness and decency of a person? Let me testify to how good of a guy he is. I just want you to know that my philosophy is what I want you to know. You want to understand me? I think this race is about, the ideas are important, but it's the values underneath them. And I've shown a city. I'm the only person in this race that there's an Oscar-nominated movie about. I'm not exaggerating. The movie's called, what? Street Fight. Some folks have watched it. You want to talk about how to fight and beat in a gritty, tough environment where I had death threats, my phones were tapped by the municipal police, headquarters broken into, thuggery, violence, racialized names. And we overcame it all, not by doubling down on that. You know what King said, darkness can't drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate can't drive out hate, only love can do that. Did we beat Bull Connor in Alabama by bringing bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses? No. We beat him by artists of activism calling to the moral imagination of this country to get more people out and more people involved. You all know Donald Trump in some swing states got less votes than Mitt Romney got? You think that we lost that he beat us in that last election? Heck, we got more votes than him anyway. But in places, some swing states, gosh, think about just black folks. In Pittsburgh, Michigan, and Wisconsin. We lost those 3 states by 77,000 votes combined. In the greater Milwaukee area alone, about 70,000 less blacks came out to vote in 2016 than voted in 2012. We better have a candidate that doesn't just speak to people's heads, speaks to their hearts, their lived experience, their spirits, and gets more people out. That's what those artists of activism of our past did. You think we got women's right to vote because a bunch of men got together on the Senate floor in 1920 and said, hey fellas, let's give women the right to vote. Ready, break. No! We got it because incredible activists like Alice Paul, the first person that was ever arrested in front of the White House for protesting. Before Gandhi, she went on a hunger strike in prison. They shoved tubes down her throat to force feed her. She pricked the moral imagination of all of us. Got more people active, got more people involved. People said, Cory, when you were mayor, God, you did a lot of things, got a lot of national attention. Yeah, that was my job. Because people in communities in Iowa, you know what it's like to come from a place where people look down at you, ignore you, overlook you, leave you out. And so I was all about taking my leadership challenge to beat not to beat individuals, but to inspire them. I'm a city council person, I went to an area that was overlooked for years, violence, drug dealing, nestled in this hole between some of the wealthiest suburbs in America. And so I went out there and said, enough of this. I went on a hunger strike and challenged people. Hundreds, if not thousands of people came out to lend hand. When I was mayor of the city of Newark, trying to get people to see those folks we relegate to the shadows, hardworking people, full-time jobs, who still need food stamps, but you know what? $2.14 a day is not enough to feed a child. The next president has got to be, our nominee has got to be someone that speaks to the heart and speaks to the gut. That's what I've been doing my whole career. Challenging Americans not to turn against each other, but to turn to each other. This election is about that. We don't need, King said it, the problem today is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. This is one of those moments where we as Democrats win, when we excite and ignite and inspire the whole coalition to come out. That's the urgency I feel in this moment, is to make sure we have a nominee that can reach out to all of our party, those disaffected, those who are moderate Republicans, anybody that understands that this is not about left or right, it's about right or wrong. We're not going to win the Senate seat back unless more Iowans get involved. The higher the voter turnout, the more likely we win the Senate seat here. It's as simple as that. We got to win in states that have very diverse populations. North Carolina, when Obama was on the ticket, we won that state and had a Democratic senator. We have a Democratic senator from Georgia. We got 2 Senate seats up there now. We have got to understand that the enemy is not them. And whoever the us and them, let's stop even those dynamics. Let's start talking about us, because to deal with big problems like climate change, is that going to be solved in a partisan way? Climate scientists say that we have to have the same kind of mobilization we did in World War II. Well, you know, in World War II, my grandmother talked about being a part of beating the Nazis, and she was from Des Moines, 4'10". But she had her victory garden. She bought war bonds as a working class woman. Everybody got involved. The leader that solves problems, I saw this when I was mayor. It's not the one that says, follow me. No, the one that inspires other people to the urgency that they too must lead. If you elect me your president, I'm warning you right now. I'm giving you a warning. This is what we should do, right? Every candidate should have a warning label. Bernie Sanders, warning label, I may not comb my hair. Andrew yin or yang. Warning label, every adult will have to go to Saturday math classes. You know what my warning label is? If you make me your president, I'm going to ask more from you than any president has ever asked from you in your lifetime. Now, I'm pretty confident in this room, every one of you, I'm going to put more money in your pocket. I'm going to double the production of the double the production of the earned income tax credit, which is going to give 150 million Americans a tax increase. I'm going to make sure we have affordable child care. I'm going to increase Social Security payments. In fact, me and some of the other people in this race are on a bill to lift the cap on the top 2% people in America to make sure that we can expand Social Security. If you're thinking about where you're going to live when you're older, I'm not going to make you burn into poverty in order to qualify for Medicaid. So we can go through all the ways I'm going to actually probably make you better off. I'm going to drive down the cost of your prescription drugs. But I'm going to ask for more from you. Because none of these big problems, from gun violence all the way to climate change, and some of the problems when I talk about empathy and love, it's not a political tactic. It's how can we be a nation that says the national anthem, that sacred song that ends with home of the brave, but when our bravest come home, they're disproportionately homeless. Is that politics, or does our civic spaces reflect the best of our human values? Because clearly it doesn't. We're a nation that looks at the flag and we swear an oath. We make a pledge to liberty and justice for all, but we have a criminal justice system so distraught that we treat you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. That's what Brian Stevenson says. And we decide that our prisons, you want to tell a lot about the soul of a nation? Look at their prisons. Go to Turkey, they put journalists in jail. You all back there are not the enemy of the people. You want to look at Russia? They put political prisoners in jail. Who do we overwhelmingly incarcerate in our country? The poor, the mentally ill, and the addicted. And disproportionately the black and brown. I believe in us. I know what our values are as a country, but our civic spaces are not reflecting them, even when we agree. And this is when I talk about we as a nation need to remember who we are. Because in my parents' generation, when 4 girls died in a bombing in Birmingham, all over this country, from here in Iowa, people said, no, enough, not on my watch. And we pushed and we fought and we overcame the longest filibuster in Senate history and passed legislation. We did that. When some of you know this history. When women at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory caught on fire were throwing themselves out windows because of the horrible sweatshop conditions, no exits. They threw themselves out windows to die on the pavement below. We didn't just sit back and say, that's a shame. No, there's an uprising in our country, demands that we make change, and we changed laws in Washington that protected workers' rights that now my generation takes them for granted. We forget the struggles. But now, what about my generation? What about my generation on our watch? There's heartbreaking things, women dying in New York, girls dying. Now there's heartbreaking things. In fact, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. But how does my generation respond to some of the worst heartbreak when people get slaughtered at a concert in Las Vegas or in a nightclub in Orlando? Nothing changes. When people are killed in houses of worship, from a synagogue in Pittsburgh to a black church in South Carolina, nothing changes. When our children are slaughtered under their desks, shot one by one from Parkland to Newtown. The strongest nation on the planet Earth, and it's not because of the size of our military, it's because of our history of connecting one to another. The strongest nation on the planet Earth, instead of changing laws that 90% of us agree on, that 86% of NRA members agree on, instead we decide just to send our kids to school with the implicit message, we can't protect you, so we're going to teach you how to hide. There are now more shelter-in-place drills in American public schools than fire drills. Is this election about who has the best 15-point policy plan on gun violence? No. I think I do. But no. This election is about which leaders, plural, can inspire us again to see each other as each other's hope and promise. I want to take questions, but I got to end with one more story. Because you've got to know that this is my whole life. Heck, the book I wrote a few years ago is called United. I believe the call of every generation to meet the challenges of that generation, beating the Nazis, going to the moon. I believe the call of every generation is to, number one, pull people from the margins, out of the shadows, with the understanding that we are each other's keepers. That you cannot marginalize, demean, or degrade anybody with all of us not being weaker. I cannot stomach a nation that leads to the industrial nations in infant mortality, in maternal mortality, in child poverty. God, read the column in the New York Times by a guy today who's just writing what's happening. How can our nation have yet another year in a row of our life expectancy going down? And their deaths of despair. We don't talk about suicides, which are the top gun violence in our country. This is a crisis in our country. We are losing our treasure. And I am here because of this irrational love in this country. I am a physical manifestation of a conspiracy of love, of people who don't look like me, or didn't necessarily pray like me. 50 years ago, I was born with more hair than I have now. I had just been born, my parents moving up from the South, looking for a place to live in this Mecca. I don't know if you've ever heard this amazing American place called New Jersey. And my parents, this black family, would show up in the place with the best public schools. They happened to be white neighborhoods, and they would be greeted by real estate agents at houses and be lied to. Oh, this house is sold, this house is pulled up the market. And my parents were distraught and discouraged and didn't know what to do, but you know what? Who they found? They found America. Because they found people that met in a living room, mostly white folks. I always say, before you tell me about your religion, first show it to me in how you treat other people.
Yep.
I found, they found a group of folks, Christian and Jewish, Republican and Democrat, who said to them, we got you. They showed love your neighbor, welcome the stranger. And so they set up this sting operation. What did I call it? A conspiracy of love. And they would send my parents to look at a house. My parents were told it was sold. A volunteer white couple from the group would get up and go pretend they were home buyers to find out if the house was still for sale or not. Most often it was. And the house my parents fell in love with, they were told it was sold already. The white couple came, pretending like they liked the house. They put a bid on the house because they found out it was still for sale. The bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing in the real estate agent's office, the white couple did not show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer. And they confronted the real estate agent. Now this should be the end of the story, but it's not. The real estate agent, seeing he'd been caught, gets so angry he stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face.
Oh my God.
And sigs a dog on my dad.
Oh my God.
I grew up in this town, and I'm telling you, as I was growing up in this beautiful home, every time my dad would tell this story, the dog would get bigger. It's like, son, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. So imagine me, a black guy, growing up with black family, and I hear stories of racism and bigotry and hate, but the powerful thing about my family was that they made me understand that every generation has had it. Try being Irish in New York in the late 1800s. Try being a woman anytime.
Yes. Present day.
Every one of us in here, at some point in our family history, we were discriminated against. That doesn't define us. It never has. What we respond to it. That's what my parents taught me. My patriotism comes from stories of heroic Americans, ordinary Americans who did extraordinary things so that I could live where I live. My dad would be like, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple, because you were born on third base. You owe a debt you can't pay back. You got to pay it forward. So I was an earnest young man doing what my parents told me. I went off to Stanford University, 4.0, 1,600. 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. Football scholarship. and God bless America. I stayed and get my master's. I go overseas. Rhodes Scholar, Oxford University. I come back to Yale Law School. You think my parents would be impressed? To this day, my mom says, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. And my dad, when he sees his son graduating from Yale, he's like, all right now, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life is not about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. That's our history. I got to the Senate, and every time I walk onto the Senate floor, as the fourth black person ever to be elected to that body, every time I step there, I'm not exaggerating, I feel this weight of the millions of Americans who made it possible for me to stand up and fight for something bigger than myself. Why do I work so hard across the aisle? Because I'm here because of people loving me, Republican and Democrat, Christian, Jew, Muslim. I am the product of the unity between us, not the division. Why do I spend so much time with Republicans? Because that's what's necessary to get things done. The only major bipartisan bill to pass under this president was historic, the big bill we passed for the first time after years and years of growing mass incarceration, 500% increase in our prison population since 1980, 5% of the globe's population, 25% of the globe's prison population. We finally passed massive criminal justice reform that I helped write that has now led to the liberation of thousands of people, including folks in this state. The next Democrat is not going to succeed by who talks the loudest about the issues that they care about. It's the one that can inspire that value. And I got the last gift when I became a senator. The gift of being there every day, working with people every day, gifts every day. But this gift I couldn't anticipate because when I got there, I fell into the immodest trap of doing what a lot of senators do that have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And if your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure, you've got to admit that. And so I go back to find the people that met in a living room 50 years ago that I admit to you I never said thank you to. And I find the person who leads it. She's 93 years old. She was easy to find because she still leads that same group. And they don't fight for black folks, lots of black folks now, they fight for Americans with disabilities, Muslim couples, same-sex couples, because justice has no color, no race, no orientation. It is one justice, one nation, one love. She sends me to the lawyer who can confirm everything. I finally, from him, find out how big the dagnab dog was. And he shakes me with telling me something that so evidences my core values, why I'm running for president, why all of us really are here. I ask him why. Why would you go to so much trouble to help black families 50 years ago when there was fears of white flight, fears of real estate prices going down? You were just starting your business. You were barely making ends meet. Why? And he goes, well, I know the moment I made the decision. I go, what's the moment? He goes, March 7th, 1965. And I'm like, sir, that's very specific. What was going on March 7th, 1965? Well, he was sitting down Sunday night watching TV. And let me tell you something. Please turn to somebody younger and tell them how hard life was back then, when we only had 3 channels. They'd go off at 11 p.m. Look at your expression, I know! The horror of it all! That is priceless. So let me tell you something else. This is going to really shock some people who don't know these days. You literally had to get up to change the channel. Your parents had you. Your parents had you out of love. You never have to question that. My brother and I grew up thinking that my dad just had us so we could change the channels for him. And so here is a man watching TV on March 7th, 1965. Here's the movie for some of you that are more seasoned like me. Finish the title. The movie was Judgment at... Oh my gosh, I love Iowa. Most of America was watching this show, not because there wasn't anything else on, because it was just 3 channels. But it was an incredible movie about the aftermath of the Holocaust. But then something shook this country. They broke away from that movie to show a crisis, to show a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Marchers had started in Selma, trying to get to Montgomery to protest for our rights. They got stopped on that bridge by Alabama state troopers who would not let them pass. And then those troopers gassed them with tear gas and stormed in with billy clubs and started viciously beating them. We know this day now is Bloody Sunday, and please pray for the man at the front of that bridge who just got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, John Lewis. But this is us. 1,000 miles away, there's a white guy on a couch in New Jersey. This is us. What does he do? Does he just sit there and watch? Like somehow democracy is a spectator sport? No. This man is so concerned that he stands up. And it's like, I gotta go to Alabama, but then he laughs at himself. He can't afford a plane ticket. He can't even close his business. But yet, he knows our traditions, how we got here. It's not waiting for who the president is or who the senator is. We built this nation. Built it on this. Because he says, I'm not gonna let my inability to do everything undermine my determination to do something in the cause of my country in a moral moment. He knows he can't go to Alabama, but he decides to do what is one of the greatest of American traditions. He decides, you know what? I'm just gonna do the best I can with what I have, where I am. He's a lawyer trying to start a law firm, but you know what? He can spare 1 hour, he decides, just 1 hour a week of pro bono time, and he goes about looking around for somebody who might need 1 hour of legal work. And he finds this woman, young woman now, she's 93 years old, who's like, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, need some help. And the two of them start talking, working together. They come up with a sting operation, conspiracy of love. 65 turns to 66, turns to 67. Eventually it's 1969, and now they have a living room full of activists from their neighborhood who are all like, we are in. And he says, Cory, I remember this day. I get this case file of this family coming up from the South. They're frustrated, discouraged, and we got them help. We got them housing. I'm so proud of that, Cory. You know what the name on that case file was? I go, no, sir, I don't. He goes, well, the two names on that case file were Carrie and Carolyn Booker, your parents. What tradition got me here? I am literally a United States Senator because of the best of who we are. Not because of the policy plan, but because of the values that ultimately changed our policy. Because of the urgency. Because of Americans that stood up for us, for love. I am literally running for the highest office in the land where I might be, you want to talk about full circle? I might be the first descendant of a slave in America that ever goes to the White House built by slaves. Because one white guy on a couch, in a moral moment, stood up. We are all here in an afternoon on a day that feels like summer here in Iowa, for crying out loud. So you all really got to be here for something bigger than me. You're here for we. At a time that the planet is in peril. At the time that people are losing hope. At the time that our national policies are less and less reflecting our common and core values. I'm running for president because, yeah, I'm a big nerd policy wonk, but that's not what drives me every single day in this election. What I'm driven by is the best of you, the best of us. That our civic spaces are becoming bereft of love and decency and goodness and kindness. Where when you turn on the TV, you see people with hate in their eyes, screaming and yelling and filling our ears with reasons to hate another American. This is a crossroads for our country. One generation, best infrastructure on the planet Earth, now not even in the top 10 with trillions of dollars infrastructure deficit. From one generation with the best public schools on the planet Earth to now not even in the top 10 and in a front to try to defund them. One generation from going when my dad was born, the best nation in the world to be born on the planet Earth if you want to be born poor and get out of poverty. It's a measurable indice, social mobility. And now countries, our allies all brag to us that they do a better job than we do. No, not on our watch. This is the time that no matter what one president does, it's not about him. It's not a referendum on him, it's a referendum on us. And our ability, like our ancestors, to put more indivisible back into this one nation under God. If you will stand with me and work with me and love harder with me, I promise you, we'll beat Donald Trump. But that is about quoted to me by somebody who came to a previous town hall. They've been considering a lot of candidates. They told me they were going to caucus for me, and then they quoted the song. Unfortunately, I'm dating somebody. Her name's Rosario Dawson. If you date somebody who was in Rent, and yet they still tolerate your singing, but somebody, when they heard me speak, they gave me the best song quote. I love you more today than yesterday. Thank you all for giving me that generous reaction. So let's answer some questions. I'm going to start with my friend right here, unless you don't want to go first. What's your name?
My name's Kate Fisk. I live here in Mount Vernon.
Is your last name Fisk?
Fisk.
Oh, there's a college named Fisk. Fisk University. My mom went there.
Really?
Yes.
I have no connections with that, but thank you so much for that beautiful message.
Thank you.
It's very inspiring. I think all of us here have really enjoyed it. I'm older American. Everybody can see that, and I know there's a lot of other older Americans in the room here too. I worked for a company, Rockwell Collins, for 43 years. I retired after that time, and at about 3 months, I knew that I couldn't stand that. My mind was turning to quitting, and I needed to be involved in things.
Yes.
So I got involved in human services. What I find out about human services, I work for a large nonprofit in Cedar Rapids. We have one of the largest Meals on Wheels programs.
I just want to make sure everybody can hear you in the back, because this is really important. I'm going to hand you the mic. I'm going to stand right here.
I work for a nonprofit in Cedar Rapids called Horizons.
Oh, yeah.
And we have one of the largest nonprofits that serves Meals on Wheels in the country. And you may think that's kind of exaggerating, but it really is one of the largest ones. We have experienced over the years that I've worked there since 2002, a constant diminishing funding from the Older Americans Act.
Yes.
This is something that is absolutely unacceptable. In the Older Americans Act, there's other things that are also in there too. The SNAP program is involved with that. We also have the heating assistance that's involved with that. You're pretty familiar with the Older Americans Act.
Very much so.
This is something that we need to fight for. Older Americans want to stay in their homes, they want to be independent for as long as they possibly can.
Ms. Fisk, can I answer your point? And first, we turned it off. I gave you the mic and I took away your power.
I'm working on a bill right now.
Yeah.
Speaking with our governor. And I have 4 bills and we're running to have to do with older adults. I'm a part of a legislative group here in Iowa that fights older adults. I got 4 bills going on, that's one of them.
Miss Fisk, I'm not serious. I will never forget you. And I would hug you again. I would hug you again, or people would start talking. You fight on the state level for that legislation. I already have the legislation in the Senate, but I'm going to be the president that makes it law that does this. That says the workers of America who have the most important jobs in terms of elevating human dignity. These are home health care workers. These are hospice workers. These are all these workers who work full-time jobs. They're incredible. Are angels. They're angels that do not get paid, barely get paid a living wage. So my long-term care legislation, which actually makes changes in Medicare as well, to give people more of a decision in their latter years of life to age at home if they want to. It has a clause in it for $15 minimum wages for the workers themselves or going higher. This is so important what you're working on. And before people start thinking this is just you and me in this room, I'm going to let somebody else ask this question. All right, you're very welcome. Waving into the crowd here. Can somebody get him a mic? I'm going to go this gentleman here just because of the haircut. And the bow tie. What? And I do need a hat. So yell it out, sir. I don't know if anybody's going to get to you. Yell it out.
My name is Jim Moriarty. I'm an attorney. And I have an attorney question for you. How do you try a case when more than half of the jury is being told what to do? By a guy who's working as a defendant.
Excuse me. I need to sit down. Look, there is a reason why this great book written by John F. Kennedy called Profiles in Courage, there's a reason why it's a thin volume. And I say that in a smart aleck way, but I just want to make the case that this has been a difficult time for me because I've just seen moments where I don't get it. Like a Republican senator pulling their endorsement away from Donald Trump because after the Access Hollywood case, but then getting so much blowback that they restore their endorsement. And so I just don't think that we are, I'm hearing great things from Mitt Romney. Alaska has this great senator, she's Lisa Murkowski, that are saying such noble things, not rushing to conclusions, and saying that there's a special oath, if you read the Constitution tonight, there's a special oath for impeachment trials, where we basically are going to have to swear an oath to be impartial. But yet you have Mitch McConnell going around openly, and Susan Murkowski, Susan Collins has even criticized him for this. For how could you say you're just going to be in lockstep coordinating with the White House when you're going to have to swear an oath that you should honor?
I used to buy nails from Susan Collins from her family hardware store in Caribou Bay.
That's why communications important, because I thought you meant first nails. I affirm that, whatever nails you want to buy. Look, again, I just want to let everybody know, I've learned this the hard way. In the Senate, I've lost my temper before. And I really learned that the energy you often bring is the energy that you sort of exercise. And so this is not one time I'm going to sit and shame on my Senate colleagues. No, this is the time I'm going to swear my oath and do my job. Most likely this trial, in quotes, is going to end with Donald Trump not being removed from office. And then I'm going to get back on this campaign trail right here in Iowa and fight really hard to make sure that I'm the nominee because I believe that I am the best person to win. And let me use this as a moment to be very honest with everybody because this campaign has presented interesting moments for me in the last month or two. One of the reasons why I love Iowa, not just because my grandmother's here and my grandmother emigrated here from the South, but I love you because you never care about national polls. And seriously, like, it's like, in fact, it seems like you guys have this desire to be defiant of any national poll, because you very rarely have you ever supported the person who was ahead in the national polls. Carter came here and won. Actually, he didn't quite win the caucus.
Right.
Some of you all know this. He got second to none of the above, I think. Was that correct?
Yeah.
Undecided.
Yeah, the undecided.
Yes, but there's so many people who are like me, younger candidates polling in low digits, that you all elevated out of this process to go on to win. There was, in 2003, there was 1 month before the caucuses of 2004, 1 month, John Kerry and John Edwards were polling at 4% and 2%, number 6th and 7th, and then went on 1 month later and won the Iowa caucuses. Now, there's a new thing here that's really frustrating to me, which is the Democratic leadership in Washington, D.C. is telling Iowans that you're only going to get to see certain people on the debate stage, and they're going to use as a criteria polling which has not been predictive in the past. If this rule was back there, John Kerry would not have been our nominee, because he wouldn't have won in Iowa, because he wouldn't have been on the debate stage. So this is kind of a frustrating double blow to our campaign. One is that I will be off the field. Our best conversion rate, just about 2 hours ago, we did a Iowa caucus. We got like 30% of the people that showed up, almost a third, signed commitment to caucus cards for us. We are winning this campaign slowly because of our direct contact with voters. We now are number 3 in the state for net favorabilities. Most people haven't made their final decision, but we're number 3 in the most popular candidates, and it's just people that are liked. I joke that Wall Street Journal even did a poll, is which candidate, if they end up as a nominee would have the least people upset about it. And I won as the least offensive candidate. Least offensive. We have endorsements from your local leaders that are incredible. We're now number 1 or 2 in endorsements. We are doing everything necessary, like past campaigns like Obama's, to help them go in here and upset expectations. And so it's frustrating to me that at the time that we need to be doing hundreds of more of these, or dozens of more of these, that I'll be down in Washington for this trial, that I'm not happy about that he's on trial. I wish he didn't violate his oath of office and do things necessary to impeachment. We're dealing with a DNC that seems to think that the criteria that they're establishing is not endorsements, not net favorability, not the number of headquarters you have open, not the grassroots organizing team that you have, that Des Moines Register from Jump called our team, us and Elizabeth Warren, the best organizing teams. But they're using national polling, which has never been predictive of who would become our candidate. So that's why I'm relying heavier on folks here than I would be at this point of just asking for help. This is an interesting thing, fellas. You should. This is directed to you, fellas. We are the number 1 candidate from the last quarter for a percentage of Iowa women contributing to them online. Guys, come on. So if you believe in me, don't make this decision about who you caucus for out of fear.
Right.
Make it out of faith.
Yes.
Make this caucus decision not about what you think electoral viability, what the pundits are saying. Make it out of who best you think that should lead this country, the values you want. And if you're joining with me, we're going to need your help. Remember, 1 hour a week of pro bono time changed my destiny. 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week of door knocking and calling for us could change my destiny again. All right, a couple more questions.
Senator, we have time for one more question.
So, for those of you who want to know who that strange man over there is, his name is Mike Frozalone, the good representative who introduced me. By the way, man, the way you stood up for me in that earlier in this, like, wow, seriously. You are a really good friend, and I'm just grateful that you are here. But Mike, I just want you to know, he's a leader of my campaign in the state, and he's doing an incredible job. He gets all this kudos from local media, but I just want to say, I'm running for President of the United States. You're not the boss of me. I'm taking 2 questions instead of 1. I'm doing 100% more. So I saw a gentleman here, and just because if I had hair, it would be the exact same color.
You've told me that before.
I have told you, but I didn't tell it to you in front of 150, 200 people.
Actually more.
Okay. All right, so we go 1 and then 2, okay? Sir?
The national debt is overwhelming and frightening, particularly for children and grandchildren. What are your thoughts?
Did you guys hear the question back here? I don't think everybody heard. He said, how is it that you're so handsome? This is a really great question because you don't hear about it a lot, which is the national debt. And I have a lot of worries that first of all, I think our debt load is not what people thought it was generations ago, debt to GDP. But I still think that it's way too high. And for those of you who know that I'm not being partisan, this is just fact, that the people who've been able to get the debt down were Democratic presidents, from Bill Clinton to Obama. The people that have spiked it up are Republican presidents. And so the best thing I can say to you, when I do interviews, I always want to know, not tell me what I want to hear. Like, sir, I'm very concerned about that. I will address it when you're president. I try to ask in my interviews what the people have been doing about these issues when they confronted them before. So as one of the people who was actually an executive in this race, who ran a city and inherited a massive deficit. We had a structural deficit that literally top cabinet members of mine were coming in and saying, we are not going to make payroll. There's just no way. Of all the executives in the Senate, I hope some media fact checks me, because we have Chris Coons, who was a county executive. We have former governors like Mitt Romney. I'm the person in the Senate that has cut their budgets the most when they were executives. I cut my city's budget 25%, passed on to my next mayor. Now he's actually able to increase spending again because we did other things to grow our way out of our crisis. So I know how to live within our means. And I'm one of these people that's going to tell you right now, I saw this question on one of the debates I was on where somebody else was asked, will you cut the military budget? And the person sort of didn't answer the question. And I was like, darn, I wish that would come to me. Because there was a guy in the Senate who was always talking about how we're spending so much more and have less capacity. And we need to deal with this because there's so much egregious waste in the military. And that wasn't a Democrat, that was John McCain. And so, Chuck Grassley said that too?
Yep.
All right. So I think that we have huge areas where we have got to govern down our spending pretty dramatically. Let me tell you one that people don't talk about enough. There was a recent Inspector General report of the IRS that found out that we have made the IRS so feeble and weak that they don't have a chance to audit, not people who are making $100,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $25,000 a year. The biggest money earners, they estimate the tax fraud going on in our country to the tunes of tens of billions of uncollected taxes by people using all these schemes to hide it. So here you have this president gives more tax cuts to the wealthiest, and we are seeing that there are many wealthiest who are cheating this country out of fair taxes. So there's so many things that I know we could be doing to save taxpayer dollars and to recoup more just taxes. And so I like when people ask me about how you're going to pay for this, how you're going to pay for that. It's something I really think about. And for most of the things I say, and I say most very purposefully, because there are some things using congressional budget rules that I can't justify. But I know that in the long-term strength of our economy, like, for example, every dollar you invest in NIH spending, which I want to increase a lot, over time will return about $7 to your economy. But the congressional budget says we only measure over 10, the deficit impact over 10 years. So pretty much everything I can show we're going to pay for using the math of Washington, but even more so over long term. I'm somebody that's had to live within my means. I'm going to do it. And one of the areas where the most egregious waste going on right now, and we just saw it this week, when a president decided to spend tens of millions of more dollars by moving thousands of people back into the Middle East. These are things that I'm going to find a way to bring our troops home and make sure we do it in a way that keeps us safer and drives down military spending. You guys clapped over the closer. He said that's the best answer he's heard, and I'm grateful. Thank you very much. My friend, please stand up because I want people to read your shirt if they can.
Yes.
And say your name so everybody knows. I'm sorry I'm blocking you, sir.
So my name is Lindsay, and I'm recently an uncommitted caucus goer. As Julian was my first choice and dropped out, unfortunately. One of the things I really appreciated about him was the police reform plan. As you can probably guess from the shirt, the work that I do is working with individuals who are homeless, and I've actually talked about this, but this is a really long time ago with you. And I spent 2 hours Tuesday this week de-escalating 2 different clients without any real option, without the ability to want to call the cops, because I don't want to call the cops on someone who is having a mental health crisis or substance abuse crisis. And unfortunately, one of them did end up going to jail later that day after my work closed and after I de-escalated them, because I do stuff to go home with my daughter and can't stay there all day. And and as we talked about, we don't get paid a ton, in this type of work. And there's a huge group of folks that I work with who don't need to be institutionalized. They don't need to be in prisons. They don't need to be in mental health facilities. But they end up on the streets, and it exacerbates their mental health. And because of this, they have criminal histories that impact whether or not they can get into housing. And I've seen people who I have not been able to help get into housing. I work with rapid rehousing, which is federally funded, and Housing First is a Housing First program. And I guess my question is, how do we help these folks and ensure that, like, if we have to call an emergency number for them, that they're not faced with these that might get overly violent towards them? And how do we ensure that these folks have housing that is safe for them? Because a lot of times when they're going into housing, they're not going into the best housing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let me just say something about Secretary Castro, who's been my friend for a very long time. And just like Kamala, I hurt when these folks left. Here, I can tell you, because I just know how good they are. And Castro was somebody on the debate stage like me. We were constantly bringing up issues that nobody sort of talks about, but that affects housing is an issue. I mean, more Americans now are housing insecure than they've been in a very long time. And he just had this unbelievable ability to not only bring issues up, but bring them up in a human way that I think called to the hearts of Americans. And it's a shame that he's gone. I talked to him in the morning, but he dropped out. We not only affirmed our sort of love and friendship, but more importantly, about we need to have housing talked about. And so let me just, again, tell you why I talk about so much about values. It's because we have housing policy that makes no economic sense, makes no moral sense, and it makes us less safe. And just understand, this goes to a lot of areas of our country. No moral sense, no economic sense, makes us less safe. Our immigration policies make no moral sense, make no economic sense, and make us less safe. When you have Americans who are afraid to report crimes, I had a 14-year-old who was assaulted, whose friend was assaulted, also a 14-year-old, tell me that she didn't call the authorities because she was afraid that her parents would have to show up who were undocumented. So in my city, tons of my police officers always tell me that they're not getting the cooperation from immigrant communities about solving crimes, burglaries, and assaults because now they're afraid of the police. Well, that makes us less safe, it hurts our economy, and it violates our values. This is a theme in our country right now that this is a great example. So I bring this all the time because I went and spoke to this group, Plymouth Housing Group in Seattle, who did a study of the people that live in their supportive housing for people with mental illness. And they just did all-in balance sheet analysis. This goes to the really great question about what's better for the economy, what's better for our debt. And they just said for the city of Seattle, where are they spending more on? Supportive housing, which is expensive. People there to make sure you're taking your meds, support you with counseling, try to get you back into work. What's more expensive? Mentally ill people homeless on the street, or people with mental illnesses in supportive housing? And they found out, yeah, somebody said it already. Stop jumping on my lines, okay? Where do they end up when they're on the streets? Where do they end up? Jail and hospitals. And who pays what that? So this is it's not rocket science. It's just unbelievable that we are a society that does the wrong thing, drives down human potential, and this is. I didn't know this until the Carpenters educated me on this. I've had a few aha moments with the Carpenters who have been going to all the candidates and advocating on mental health issues. And then they've taken me, I thought I was this big policy wonk nerd, but taught me things about mental illness that I didn't know. This is what I love, how people turn their personal pain into a public purpose, because they are advocating now here in this state and in the nation for really insightful changes to how we deal with mental illness. But I didn't know that before you all talked to me that untreated mental illness actually are episodes in the head that further deteriorate the brain. And the longer something goes without being treated, the harder it is, and the more often the illness can cause more and more permanent damage. So by not being there with counseling and treatment, letting people stay on the streets, there could be spiraling further and further to points where they're harder and harder to reach and get back. That's the trauma, exactly. And so I ran a city, and it was a city that's a lower income city than most areas. And the difference between low income and more moderate or high income communities isn't less problems in terms of there's mental illness everywhere. It's very non-discriminatory mental illness. Addiction is very non-discriminatory addiction. Often in suburban towns like I grew up in, we're just much better at hiding it, not having it open. And so these are issues that housing issues I'm very sophisticated. This is why Castro and I bonded so much, is because we don't know about these things as just a policy issues on our website. He was a mayor, I was a mayor. We had to deal with these issues and find innovative ways. In a recession, we found creative ways to double the production of affordable housing with a lot of supportive housing for veterans. Women escaping sexual trauma or abuse. We don't do right by this community, and again, often these are women with children, that the trauma, the more they stay in that environment because they have no place to go, the more the trauma is visited on their children, and again, long term, more expensive, makes us all less safe, and it's morally wrong. And so that's why I've done everything that I'm doing. I keep bringing it back to what is this election really about? Whoever leader, and I hope you'll support me, but I hope if it's not me, that you'll go back and think to yourself, who can better awaken the moral imagination of this country and have created ways to get these issues into the center of our discussion? Because they're not being spoke about by the debate stage. And as Castro out, and I'll find out at midnight tomorrow night whether I make this debate stage, they're getting talked about less and less. And so my urgency, not just in this election, because elections themselves are ways to affect the national conversation, but my urgency to win this election is because I know how in my city we made change, which was first getting this whole country to see each other better. I mean that quite purposefully. We were in Newark, people were scared of Newark. When I still remember this one, Hannah Montana came to Newark's arena, and my phones in the mayor's office lit up with moms and dads calling, "Will my child be safe coming to Newark?" It was, people were afraid of our city. And we knew we had to change the moral imagination of our city, and I did all kind of creative things to do it. My favorite is this fight I took on with the host of the Tonight Show, who in their monologue said, I hear Cory Booker has a new healthcare, I hear Newark, New Jersey has a new healthcare program. I was proud we had done things to lower prescription drug costs, and their joke was, though, I think the best healthcare program for the city of Newark is a bus ticket out of town. And I was like, wow, you are in trouble. and again, you don't always have to do it with anger. You can often do it with humor. So I sat behind my desk and filmed a video saying, Conan O'Brien, he was the host then, has insulted the city of Newark. And I bragged about my city, and then I said, by the power vested in me, by the people of the city of Newark, I hereby ban Conan O'Brien from Newark Airport. I said, you're on the no-fly list. Try JFK, buddy. And I put it up online, and he had millions of people who watched him, but my video went viral. I'm suddenly getting so much earned media for my city, satellite trucks outside, people angrily calling up saying, you violated Conan's civil rights. And I'm like, joke. And what about this? Don't you understand? It got so bad that the TSA felt obliged. I'm not joking. The TSA put a clarification on their website saying that mayors in America do not have the power to ban people from their airports. It became such a big story that I'm going on everybody from Larry King to you name it, getting so much free media for my city. By the end of it, Conan invites me on, apologizes on national TV, gives $100,000 to Newark charities, and I get back, and it's even easier for me to get developers to come, philanthropists to come. Every day, my job as an executive in Newark was to change the energy about my city, to change the moral imagination, to get people that often people are afraid of to see their human dignity, to get legislation passed on a state level. I was able to push legislation to help empower my city. I had to get people that live far away from me in my state to see me, to expand their moral imagination. That's what the next president's going to have to do. So I can tell you policies that I'm so proud of. Let's pick this one. We have a rentals tax credit. I like the mortgage interest deduction, wonderful tax credit for people who own homes. The majority of it is used by people who make more than $250,000 a year.
Right, that's right.
That's a tax expenditure. I'm going to say, okay, fair enough. I don't want to take that away, but I'm going to say a renter
Yes.
If you're paying more than a third of your income in rent, you're gonna get a refundable tax credit from that third of your income to the market rent. And that's gonna take 10 million people out of poverty. So I have policy ideas, but how do you get them passed? You begin to make this country again say, wait a minute, this isn't a right or left issue. This is a right or wrong issue. And we can do better. And that's where I want to end with this story. I want to tell you right now that empathy should be talked about in our civil discourse. That when somebody is mad at you or yelling at you, that you don't have to turn your temperature up and yell at them. This is a moment in America where we need people who can cut through that and diffuse it. And I am stumbling towards progress. I've made mistakes. Even as a senator, I lost my temper. I still remember at one hearing where somebody was involved in the whole S-hole country controversy. But let me tell you, the best teacher I ever had on this was a guy named Frank Hutchins, who was my greatest mentor ever. I was too big for my britches, Yale Law guy who comes down to Newark and begins to work as a housing rights activist, right? And I go to my first big tenant meeting to get information for it, to write my complaint against this slum lord with its housing leadership. But the meeting went on forever, and I just was frustrated by the end. I'm like, God, it's like, but Frank Hutchins, he looked at everybody who came up to the microphone as if they were the first speaker of the night. And you know people with those kind of gentle eyes. By the end, and every speaker was speaking to him as if it was his meeting. I'm walking out, I make some obnoxious comment to him, and he just stops. He looks at me gently. He goes, Cory, you don't understand. We're trying to take down a powerful man, a wealthy man, who's doing really bad things. We're trying to repair these buildings. But you know, in order to do that, we first have to repair the community. We are strong when the linkages, we affirm them, we see each other, we listen to each other, we build the strength that comes from our connections to one another. That first meeting, the first time, some people who have no heat and hot water, have rats and roaches, the first time they get to stand up before their community, before authority figures, and talk to their pain. They deserve to be seen. Well, this guy changed my life. And he told me to get involved in politics. They pushed me to run for city council. That wasn't my plan. The best way to make God laugh is to make plans for yourself. And this is how I got elected, because I lived in the city a year. And I'm running for city council person, the biggest city in our state, and against the machine, and nobody had lost almost virtually as a city council person. The only way the joke was back then, the only way they got out of office was death or conviction. And the latter, not conviction of principles. But I won because these tenant leaders and other activists, like the people who are endorsing me in this state, they would take me around, knock on doors. People look through the peephole, see me, not open their door. But then they look next to me, oh, Miss Jones, Miss Yancey, Miss Sewell, Frank Hutchins. They'd open the door, and Frank would step up and say, you don't know him, but you can trust him. He won't leave us. And they make the pitch, and the person would say, I'm in. I get elected to city council. I get elected to mayor. Frank gets ill, and my friend, he goes into hospice. Okay, these hospice workers were angels, underpaid for what they were doing. And I go to see him, and they know it's his last day. He's very ill, and they pull me aside, and they say, Mayor, this is probably going to be it. You need to say your goodbyes. They told me his eyesight had gone, which I knew, and they said he probably won't be able to talk to you. He can't talk really. But go in and say your goodbyes. And so I walk in. This is very emotional for me. I would not be, at that point, mayor. This is about 10 years ago. I clearly wouldn't be here. Think of all the people, from a guy on a couch to Frank Hutchins, all had to go in to get me to where I am right now. And so I walk into his room and I close the door. And some of you who dealt with hospice before, his breath was low and shallow, rapid and shallow, rather. And I announced myself. I go, Frank, it's Cory. And then as I'm walking to his bed, I see this amazing sight, because he looked peaceful, but now he's struggling to get words out. And his first one may sound like a joke to you, but he goes, I see you. I walk to his bedside, and now one of my life's greatest mentors, my last moments with him. I'm sorry, I didn't talk housing policy. I didn't talk, budgets. talk the values that we all want written about us in our obituaries, the things we want our family members to remember about us. And so this was it. I hug him and I tell him how much he means to me. I tell him how much he transformed my life, sent me in directions I never thought I would go. But eventually I'm the mayor of the city. I was busy. I knew they were waiting for me outside. I had to go. And so I hug him and I hold him and I kiss him on the forehead. I kiss him on the cheek and I say, I love you. And then I get up to leave, and as I'm getting up, here he is trying to force himself to talk again, and he forces out the words, I love you. And so I want to leave you guys with today the last words of one of my greatest life mentors. I see you. I love you. I see you. I love you. We are a nation that there are too many people that we are not seeing, but they are us. I see you, I love you. The veteran struggling with PTSD who's thinking about suicide 22 a day, I see you, I love you. The single mom who doesn't know how she's going to take care of her special needs child, I see you, I love you. The elderly American who's worked all their lives, has a pension, that's now going belly up and doesn't know how they're going to live, I see you, I love you. To me, that's what this election's about. To me, that's where our country is. And if we can awaken that, where we see each other, our dignity, how much we need each other, regardless of what party we're in or where we live in the country, but we see the truth that we are one nation under God. If we love each other, love is not words or sentimentality, love is action, love is sacrifice, love is service, Kay. If we can live that, I see you, I love you, I promise you, our best days are not behind us, they're ahead. I promise you that we will not tear each other apart. We will find ways to bring each other together. I promise you that no matter what he says that might bring us down, we will rise. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.